Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and we are here today with another game discussion. This one hot on the heels of the current Rainbow Six Siege closed beta, as well as the announcement of the Star Wars Battlefront beta, which is going to be running October 8th through October 12th. A very short beta, and also very, very close to the game's launch date. Not much of a beta, if you ask me. That game will probably be gold by then, and we will somehow be playing a game that has already been printed and is getting ready to be sent out to the public. Not a huge fan of that, but we'll talk about that later in the video, because that's what this entire discussion is about. Betas, alphas, whatever you want to call them. Their importance to the industry, to us as gamers, and why I think they should practically be mandatory for online experiences like Rainbow Six Siege and Star Wars Battlefront. Now, let's take a look at the way that beta access works. There's a lot of different, sort of varieties. There's a lot of different ways that publishers, whether it be indie or AAA, are allowing players to gain access to beta test, early play sessions of their products before release. Some I'm completely on board with, some I'm completely against, and some I am understanding of. So probably the biggest one, the most primary one, the one that was happening way back in the days on consoles even for the original Modern Warfare, is simply just a sign up, first come to serve lottery type beta access. You go to their website, you plug in your name and your email address, and if you're lucky, you'll get chosen to participate in this closed beta, and you'll actually get to test out the game beforehand. The developers reap the benefits of having a really large testing group to really stress test their servers and, break the game in ways that the Q&A team and the developers just maybe didn't have the time to do so. Pretty good way, right? I'm kind of on board with that. One of the best ways, though, of course, is an open beta. Now, understandably, an open beta is probably a very scary thing for developers, as they are allowing in an excessively large amount of players to play their game in a very early state, to possibly crash the servers endlessly. This is something that is probably not for every single developer, and I can understand why doing something like Rainbow Six Siege is done, where they're staggering the invites out to players to make sure that the servers aren't getting completely annihilated, is a smart move. However, Rainbow Six Siege, much like Call of Duty Black Ops 3's recent beta, has required players to actually go ahead and pre-order the game to gain access to the beta. Now, the reason I think this is silly is because they've also been giving out keys left and right all willy-nilly. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of YouTubers giving out hundreds and hundreds of keys over the last several months. IGN even gave out tons and tons of keys. In fact, I have one extra Xbox One key that I'm going to be giving out during the course of this video, and if you'd like to try and get your hands on that Xbox One closed beta key for Rainbow Six Siege, just throw a explanation down in the comment section below as to why you are excited to check out the brand new Rainbow Six, and I will pick a name at random through lottery. Of course, you guys know how I do lottery. I basically take a bunch of names, I put them in a hat, I ride down the street on my motorcycle, I throw them in the air, and a couple minutes later, some wicked fast pigeon shows up at my door and delivers the name, and that's how we're going to do things. But back on topic. As I said, pre-order beta is not something I'm a huge fan of. I much rather prefer the ability to allow anyone to gain access to the beta. Not only is it a great way to allow a consumer that is maybe sort of on the fence about purchasing your game come release time, it just makes sense to me. Let people have a sign up, stagger those invites, but give everyone the option to go ahead and participate in your beta, whether they plan on purchasing the game, whether they pre-ordered or not. Now, I understand a lot of that is just money, it's publisher stuff, there's not much we can do about it, so let's move on. Now, we also have early access. Early access has kind of really crushed the concept of an actual beta test, I mean, when beta tests first started, and you guys know I've talked about this a million times over, it was a very exclusive thing. You really had to know about it. You had to participate in it. It was something that I was huge into. File Planet was an awesome place to get your hands on closed beta keys if you were someone who was really interested in actually providing feedback to the developer. This day, a lot of that feedback is just from the people playing the game. Not too much of it actually happens on the forums. Although, trust me, there are plenty of people who are still submitting bugs and issues on the forums, and I hope that's the case for Rainbow Six Siege, because we're definitely going to need it. But I understand early access. Early access for indie developers obviously can be a great tool. Sadly, it's something that, as much as we've seen success from people like the developers behind Darkest Dungeon, quite a few other games on there, there are also a lot of games that have gone on early access and yet to be finished. Of course, early access is very much asking the player to support the development of the game, and in turn, that player gains early access to the testing and playing of said game. Now, in most cases, I think that turns out to be a situation where that player is mostly just playing the game. They feel like they've gotten a copy of it early. And again, I see more of a direct open beta format being a little bit more useful, but again, the developer would not be obtaining that money. And as a small indie dev, maybe you really need that money to eat or to sleep or to pay the bills the next day so you can keep the electricity on while you continue to develop that game. Now last, and definitely not least, and easily my most favorite of alpha closed beta practices, is what we see happening very often with a lot of these free-to-play MMOs. ArcAge did this, Albion Online recently did this. These are games that plan on being free-to-play once they eventually go live, but they ask the player to front a usually rather large amount of money to gain access to the alpha or the beta just several months before. They usually stagger it with multiple stages. Albion Online is a complete suspect of this. They had 3 tiers, one that was like $100 to gain access to the alpha right now, one that was $60 to gain access to the alpha this summer, and then one that was like $40 that would just get you access to the game's closed beta whenever that happened. And the same thing happened with ArcAge. These are huge AAA publishers asking a lot of money from players up front for their free-to-play title in exchange for what would be in-game currency that would be purchased with real money when the game does go free-to-play. Not a fan of this system at all. It's one thing to ask the player for $20 to beta test your game, as H1Z1 did. I think that's almost kind of reasonable. Still, having a huge AAA publisher behind you kind of makes it seem all silly. Why should I pay to play a free-to-play game early? You know, it's almost come to the point now where we're supposed to feel like, oh, but it's, you know, it's our honor. It's our honor to give this developer this money. I really wanted to test this game, so I'm more than happy to pay $20 to help this thing happen. You know, I understand that with an indie developer, a crowdfunded project, but with a developer that has a huge AAA publisher behind them, not so much. Not so much. Not on board with that, and I think a lot of people agree with me on that. So those are really the 3 formats that we have for betas, right? Kind of all over the place. At the end of the day, I think we all agree that the one that benefits the consumer the most, as well as the developer the most, is a more of open, closed beta, invite style beta access. One that does not require the player to pre-order, but does require the player to sign up on a specific website. And often during the course of betas such as that, much like the Call of Duty Black Ops 3 multiplayer beta, eventually the beta is opened up towards the end of its life cycle, allowing everyone to join it without any sort of codes or access, giving the developers one last hurrah to really stress test their servers. It just seems like a very clear-cut and straightforward format that hopefully has done Call of Duty Black Ops 3 well, and hopefully will do Rainbow Six Siege well if they manage to open up the beta towards the end of its life cycle as well. Now, of course, I wanted to talk a little bit more about why I think betas should be mandatory for these big AAA developers when it comes to these multiplayer experiences. These are games that require a lot of things to ensure that they will be able to, you know, have a long life cycle. They'll be able to perform really well and ensure that the player can have a good time throughout the course of, you know, the game's existence. Obviously, things like server issues and latency problems. These are huge things that you need to be considered, and that I feel can only really be tested by any large group of players, which is why running something like the Siege beta, which not only had the beta, you know, this weekend, but going way back, they also ran a closed alpha. They've ran several technical alphas that I've been able to participate in that were under NDA. They've done a lot of testing for this game. And I think that is just the way it should be. It just makes sense to me. There's no reason for a game that is multiplayer like this, that is going to go live, you know, to not have some sort of a test that invites the community in to get the largest amount of data and feedback as possible. And I've talked about this hundreds of times. I've stressed this endlessly, and I'm stressing it once again. Now, when you look at something like the Star Wars Battlefront beta, it's not a good sign. The same thing happened with Battlefield 4. They had a beta very close to the game's launch, and a lot of problems were there. They didn't have time to delay the game. They couldn't delay the game. And they didn't have time, clearly, to fix a lot of the game's networking and latency issues because Battlefield 4 was strife with them at launch. It was not a good thing. And somehow it actually got worse several months after launch before it finally got better. I'm hoping that's not the case with Star Wars Battlefront, but doing such a short beta very, very close to the game's actual launch date seems more like just kind of giving the community what they wanted and trying to say, hey, there's a beta, rather than actually using the beta as direct feedback in testing for the game's overall benefit. We'll have to see though. I'm crossing my fingers. I would hate to see Battlefront just be a complete mess at launch. You know, DICE and EA trying to be like, well, we have dedicated servers. Dedicated servers didn't help Battlefield 4. So we'll see how that all goes down. At the end of the day, I think many of you will agree, and feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, that beta testing on a more open scale is very important for the success of multiplayer games at launch this day and age. A lot of that has to do with the rushed development cycle of so many of these AAA games. You know, you have these 2-3 year development cycles for games that probably should take a little bit longer, considering how much handcrafted you know, assets actually goes into something like Siege. So, fingers crossed that more developers recognize how vital this is. I mean, this is something that I thought they would have learned 10 years ago. You know, I was very excited to see Treyarch beta testing Black Ops 3, as they were sort of the last time that a Call of Duty game was beta tested with World at War, you know, and it makes sense to me to get this sort of insane amounts of feedback, data, and testing from a very large player basis, one that's much larger than any Q&A you know, in-studio session could ever provide. Halo also did this. You know, a lot of games out there making use of it. Let's hope that more do the same in the future. Now, as I said, if you guys are interested in getting your hands on that Xbox One closed beta key that I have for Rainbow Six Siege, I do have an extra. Just let me know down in the comments section below why you're interested in Siege. Were you a longtime Rainbow fan? Happy to see the series return. Let me know, and I'll select the winner at random by the end of the day, and you'll get your key through DM over on YouTube. Again, it's only on Xbox One. Sorry guys, that is the only key that I have, so Xbox One users only. And if you have any other questions for me regarding the topic or any thoughts that you'd like to share, feel free to throw them down in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next one.